Today, we'll be talking about, probably for the first 10, 15 minutes, about some news. It's Bitcoin Pizza Day. Someone spent, this is like it's one of those, it's the lore. First of all, Bitcoin all-time high, $111,000 now. Look at the top 100. Almost everything is green. I was just looking at Sui. Sui is down because there was literally an exploit, either a bug or an exploit, a few hours ago. Saw the news online. Let me have a look. So let's go to number 11. Sui's only down 2-3%. Not bad, actually. Some of the, I believe it's Lo-Fi. I think Lo-Fi was affected, and I think there's other Sui tokens that, or at least one that was affected too. So if you're a Sui holder or if you hold the Sui ecosystem, yes, you might see a minus 20, 30. I think it dipped at minus 75% after it was either an exploit or just a bug and someone sold liquidity, a panic dump, and yeah, not good. But overall, Bitcoin all-time high, $111,000 for one BTC. Everything is green in the top 10. And ETH is up 3%. Bitcoin is up almost 4% for both. BNB is up. BNB and Solana are up almost 5%. Doge is up 5%. Cardano is up 5%. So rejoice. And you know what's interesting is $111,000. Let's just take a step back here. When FTX crashed, right? When Binance was going through FUD of, are they solvent? Are they not solvent? Peak fear. And Bitcoin was dropping like a stone and hit, what was it, 16,000? I don't know if it hit 15,000, but 16,000. I do remember everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is the end. Is this the end of Bitcoin?" And there's still skeptics today, including Peter Schiff, the gold bug. I'm sure my theory is, I've been talking about this with other guys in the industry. Our theory is that he owns actually a lot of Bitcoin. It's just his, it plays into his gold bug persona, knocking Bitcoin. But what's interesting to me is not the price action. What's interesting to me is that no one cares. If you notice, no one cares about Bitcoin all-time high. There's like 8 people active on crypto Twitter. Retail isn't here. There is no euphoria. There are no Lambos on the timeline. There are no watches. There are no Pateks. There are no APs. And if you've been in crypto for at least a cycle, you've seen these phases, right? There is no euphoria. Retail is dead as of today. I saw a stat, the Coinbase app, which is also a very good indicator of, of euphoria and of retail being in the market. I think I saw it today. I'm not sure, but I believe I saw number 300 on the App Store. Usually it's like a top 10, top 20 app when it gets frothy. So again, no one cares, which is great. I think that's, I think if you understand crypto and where this is going, you want retail to not be here at these prices, because we want retail to push to fuel the next leg up. But we talked about this for months. I mean, this is something that's been known in the industry. This cycle is very much institutional driven. We've had many guests on the show who work directly with institutions, banks, pension funds, hedge funds, investment funds, sovereign wealth funds. They are buying Bitcoin. They're not buying Doge. I love Doge. They're not buying Doge, right? Some of them are buying ETH. If they're buying, so Bitcoin is number one. If it's Bitcoin plus something, it's ETH. If it's Bitcoin and ETH plus something, it's Solana. And so it is very much institutional driven. Retail is not here. I've asked several of my very good and close influencer friends, KOL friends. I mean, we've worked with directly with over 200 now with different projects within CoinRock. So I have very good relationships with some of the big guys, and their views are nowhere close retail all-time high. So very encouraging. You should be bullish if you're here, if you actually survived the last few months. You should be very happy because this seeing almost everything green is, especially after months of having to go through fear and seeing your bags down. And alt season, there has been no alt season, by the way. So we'll see how that plays out when it comes to alt season. One thing to remember, right? One thing we talk about a lot here on the show is, and you actually, let me put you on the big screen here. So we'll go for another like 10-15 minutes, and then we have our guest. Very busy day today at with the teams internally, so haven't had much time to do much of anything aside from just being on calls all day, which is pretty much what you do when you build and advise. Let me put you guys here, and you're on the big screen. You should be good now. Good. All right. So millions flood prediction markets as Bitcoin bulls. Bullseye 120K. Bitcoin bulls. I 125K. So this is again, you've probably seen these numbers, right? So I believe it is Standard Chartered, one of the Asian UK banks, predicting or throwing out a $500,000 target by the end of Trump's term, which is a 4.5x, almost 5x from here. And you've heard guests of the show talking about this, right? You've heard this. This is not new. You've heard the $300,000 to $500,000 range. Is it going to be this year? Probably not. In the next 3 to 5, 6, 7 years, it's possible, right? Again, the buyer type is very different. Now, coming back to your bags, because most of you don't hold Bitcoin, right? You're not Bitcoin heavy. Even if you have some Bitcoin, you don't that's not the bulk of your portfolio, which is fine. The profile, right? The buyer type for this cycle, they're not going to go down and buy and flip their Bitcoin into coin number 18 on CoinMarketCap, right? So keep in mind, Bitcoin will rally, Bitcoin will push, it will keep pushing. It doesn't mean that alts will pump as much relative to Bitcoin compared to what we saw in the previous cycles, because the buyer type, this cycle's buyer type when it comes to Bitcoin is institutional, much more than retail. So I think it's very interesting because we haven't seen retail come in. And that's something you should. I have not been getting any. I mean, again, you don't see any screenshots, big P&Ls on Twitter, on TikTok. There's no cars, there's no private jet pictures, there's no watches, which is good. It's good. So something to keep in mind when you start seeing those vibes on the timeline. That's when we start at least opening the door to euphoria. We're not there yet. So that's something that I'm really curious to see when we do hit that. We're very far from that. Things can go, if ETH hits 3K, 4K, 5K, and then alts explode, sure, we'll see retail coming back in. Retail will come back in. It's just a matter of when. Number one, it's not a matter of if. I mean, that's, I think everything's clear. I mean, our thesis and you guys watch the show, you hear the guests, right? It's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if, it's just when. And it's very dependent on what's happening in the US, of course, with the US government. A lot of issues there, of course, when it comes to tariffs. One thing, yes, but interest rates, bond prices, just like the general sentiment around the U.S. economy too. So we'll see. But this is super encouraging. It's having all-time highs, $110,000, and still no real euphoria at all. Bitcoin surged to an all-time high early Thursday, breaking over 111, reaffirming its position as a dominant force in digital assets. So I would be surprised if we talked about these cycles, right? Is a 4-year cycle broken? I definitely think the 4-year cycle is not applicable anymore, seeing how different this cycle is. And yes, the cycle is different. Every guest has said this cycle is different just because the type of buyer buying Bitcoin is very different to the previous cycles. So we haven't seen retail come in. I think if we keep seeing retail institutional interest and retail interest, I think 200,000 is pretty much a given. Whether it's in 2 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, we'll see. But I don't see how Bitcoin doesn't reach 200K in the next 12 months. Again, we've gone through from $78,000, right, a few weeks ago to 111, and no one cares. No one cares. So that's what you want to see. You want to see price going up without euphoria yet. So this is very bullish, of course. And Bitcoin Pizza Day. This is part of the lore, of course, right? Bitcoin Pizza Day, 10,000 BTC. You know the story. Every year it's Bitcoin Pizza Day, and it is today. What if your lunch one day ended up costing you over $1 billion? For one Florida-based developer, that question isn't hypothetical. It's history. Every year on May 22nd, the global crypto community gathers around its digital campfire to honor the day that marked Bitcoin's first real-world transaction, buying 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, which today would be $1.1 billion. So if you haven't seen it, just type in Google Bitcoin pizza. You'll see posts. And yeah, so this guy, that's the picture, right? 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza. And this was in 2010, May 22nd, 2010. Laszlo paid 10,000 BTC for 2 large pizzas from Papa John's. Such great advertising for Papa John's. Like guaranteed exposure to the crypto community every year on May 22nd, Papa John's. Free advertising. At the time, the coins were worth $41. Today, worth $1.1 billion. So he made an offer in a Bitcoin Talk forum, and a fellow user in the UK took him up on it and placing the order on his behalf. That's the picture. If you haven't seen the Bitcoin pizza picture, here it is. It's for those who've been in crypto for a few years, you see it every year, you know it. But it's crazy when you think about it. $41 in 2010, $1.1 billion today. Of course, the question is, would you have held? And the answer is no, you wouldn't. There's no way on earth, unless if you had lost your wallet and lost everything, lost the computer that held that Bitcoin, there was no way you're holding from $41 all the way to $1 billion. People like to kid themselves, right? But no. Even if you hold from $41 to like $5 million, $10 million, that's, come on, it's like a 1,000x return. But you're definitely not holding to like a billion with a B. So, but that's the story. Something I wanted to show you guys too is we've seen these headlines. This is yet another headline of the space growing, and again, more exposure, more licenses, more licensed, right? Countries. Crypto.com secures EU license for crypto derivatives. This is bullish, right? More people coming into the space, whether it's spot buyers or derivatives. Again, it's bringing more people to the space, and SEC Crypto Task Force, and we'll take a quick break, a few minutes here. So team, get ready. I'll just do this for about 2 minutes, and we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll welcome our guests. In the meantime, let me just send the link to the team here, copy, and let's send this here. So we've been talking about this for a few months now, right? About SEC Crypto Task Force reports coming in months. So a lot of news coming in from the SEC in the coming months. Of course, the regulatory framework that everyone's been waiting for. Speaking during a May 20 congressional oversight hearing, Atkins, so the head of the SEC, called crypto regulation a key priority under his leadership. And so he says we should be having something here in the next few months with proposed steps forward. So again, the task force was established when Trump took office January 21st. New SEC chair signals policy shift, urges legislative support. Very bullish. Again, more of the same. You know this because you watched the show, right? So more distribution. When you look at crypto.com today, every day there's like one of the major exchanges gaining a new license in key territories. Very bullish. And then finally some rules, some guidance and some frameworks coming out in the next few months. So this summer, the day that I said this on one of the recent shows, the day that I'm hearing is August, at the latest September, for the full framework and regulatory clarity from the SEC. So with that being said, let's take a quick break now. Stay tuned because we will be talking AI agents today, which is something that, of course, is extremely hyped up over the last few weeks and months, not just weeks, but months, really, the last 6 months. A lot of scams, a lot of good things, a lot of promising projects, a lot of ideas, and we're really at the beginning of this new phase, right? There's some amazing work being done when it comes to AI agents. My Web2 businesses use AI agents. For some tasks, they work more efficiently than human beings. For others, there's still a lot of improvements needed, but it's improving. That space is improving exponentially. So we have our guest coming in a few minutes here who is extremely deep into that world. So stay tuned. We will take a quick break, and we will be back in 5 minutes for our guest. Stay tuned. Hey, Matthias here, and if you're enjoying this and want access to even more alpha, early stage deals and opportunities, and also behind the scenes insights on the markets, hit the link in the description and make sure you're subscribed. It's free and it puts you ahead of the curve. Let's get back to the show. There you go. Welcome to the show. Let me just put you on the big screen and we'll get going. Perfect. David, welcome. So this is going to be very AI heavy today. I have a short bio of yours, so I always read the bio, and then I definitely want you to expand on and tell your story and what made you get into AI and crypto and all that. Very curious to hear more. So David is the CEO and co-founder of Valory, the company behind Autonolas. I hope I pronounced it correctly. The Autonolas stack and autonomous agents lab. He led the team that built the first framework for developing multi-agent systems and the decentralized ecosystem, with a PhD in applied game theory from the University of Cambridge and founding experience through Entrepreneur First. David operates at the intersection of AI, economics, and Web3, building infrastructure for on-chain autonomous coordination. That is the official bio. The floor is yours. Tell us, what does David do? Who is David?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for putting on that show, Matt. Yeah, as you read out from the bio, I've been building agents for some time.
Yep.
And actually, Autonolas has been renamed to Olas, which is also the ticker, and it's easier to pronounce. So let's use
Yep.
Olas.
Oh, that's okay.
We basically are focused on giving people, both consumers as well as businesses, agents that they can fully own. The
Yep.
same way you own your keys to own your coins in AI, you should own your weights to own your AI brain, and you should own the open source code underlying your agents. And so that's what sort of underpins the way we think and the way we build end user value. We have a number of use cases live today on Olas. They're all focused on this mode where an end user operates an agent by themselves, and
Yep.
that agent then autonomously creates value for them. So the three areas where we currently have use cases that are very easy to access are in DeFi with an agent called Modius, in prediction markets with an agent called Predict, and on the influencer side, on the social side, with an agent called Agents.fun. So those are three live use cases, and you can access them with an app called Pearl. So yeah, we can dive into these topics.
Yeah, for sure. So I really want to dissect AI and what's happening in AI, just because I think that there's so much hype in the space, of course, every day, whether it's, especially when you look at the traditional, let's call it non-crypto. Yesterday, Sam Altman recruiting literally Steve Jobs's guy to OpenAI. And Google showing, pretty much shipping almost every week something groundbreaking that is laying the foundation for the next wave of use cases, and of course in crypto too, in Web3. But I think there's so much misunderstanding about the space because it's so new, that I think people pretend that they know what even an agent does, what it is, how it works. So instead of pretending, I want to ask questions that we got also from the community here about, first of all, what is an AI agent?
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually gets asked a lot. I think the most important thing is that there's many different valid definitions of AI agents, and I think it depends a bit on context. Let me put a spectrum to you, which I think is very relevant when talking about the definition of an AI agent, and then let me give you a definition. So one, the spectrum, it goes from augmentation to full autonomy. What do I mean by this? Let me give you an example of the physical world. You have now for quite some time cars that augment your driving, right? With, in some cases, AI technology like a Tesla, for instance. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have cars that actually drive themselves. So it's no longer about augmenting the driver. There is no driver. The driver is the software.
Yep.
And that example would be the Waymo. So here you have like a spectrum between augmentation and full autonomy, and then along the spectrum you have different definitions of an AI agent. In one case, you might delegate a well-scoped task to a agentic system that takes that task as a goal, and then kind of perceives its environment, which might be in this case the road and various street signs and so on, what's happening there, and then acts on that to adjust your own driving style. In the
Yep.
other case, you give it not just that, you give it like just a single goal and say take me from A to B, and then the car figures out everything from A to B, right, without you ever getting involved. So this is a real life example. And so in these crypto AI agents, or other type of AI agents we can find in the web, we also now see the spectrum. So if you think about ChatGPT, for instance, it has agentic capabilities where you give it a prompt, and then it might decide to use certain tools in the background in order to facilitate you, giving you an answer, basically. Whereas on the other hand, so that's a sort of augmentation style use
Yep.
case, because when you're using that, you're giving the prompt, you get the response, and then you kind of walk away. There's nothing happening from that point onwards. Take other examples, like for instance, Olas autonomous AI agents, you delegate your crypto portfolio to it, and then it will continuously manage that, even when you're not there looking at the application, right? So in this case, it's much more autonomous. It's not really augmenting you and making trading decisions. It's autonomously deploying those funds. So I think, again, both of them can be described as AI agents, but there's different sort of implications. So it ranges all the way from AI workflows all the way to the sort of traditional definition of an agent, which is a software system that sort of perceives its environments, takes those inputs, then has like internals, memory, long-term, short-term, various internal compute capabilities, tools, and so on, with which it then enacts something on its environment, i.e., sends a transaction, queries some website, whatever.
So if I really dumb it down, it's basically on one side you have the done with you, which is you drive your car, it gives you kind of it helps you, but it doesn't do the work for you. And then on the other side you have the full autonomous agents which do the work whether you're sleeping, they're trading for you, reducing positions, increasing positions, and that's really done for you basically.
Yeah, I think that's nicely put. Yeah.
So what's your background? That's also something I'm always interested in when we have guests. Like, what, first of all, in crypto, like, when did you get into crypto? What got you into crypto, and how did you end up in AI, and then in crypto, in building AI in Web3 versus doing it in the traditional way? Let's call it in Web2 or more like outside of crypto.
Yeah. So my original academic background is in game theory, and that is
What is game theory? I mean, I've read about it, of course, but it's
it's also concerned with agents. So in game
yeah,
theory, you define actors as agents, and they take action in like a game, which is like basically a strategy space, and they have payoff functions. They describe how much utility or wealth they get from interacting with certain strategies, given what other agents in the game do. And so it lends itself to studying like sort of economic problems, other kind of strategic problems you might find in the world that aren't just purely interesting for economists. So conflicts, behavior, all sorts of areas of human behavior and so on. I then left that and kind of focused more on tech after I finished my PhD, and initially worked on machine learning problems in a fintech context, and then created a number of own startups that were all not successful, but also still focused on applying machine learning and data science to large data problems and creating useful end user products out of them. That was all pre the sort of hype around generative AI. And then in 2019, I joined Fetch AI, which at the time already was probably one of the first crypto AI startups, although it didn't market itself as that back then. And I built the first AI agent framework in crypto there. So at the time, we didn't have large language models, but we already had wallets, right? Like agents could use wallets. And from my perspective, actually, there's two key things that make agents interesting in the 20th century, and particularly in this decade, 21st century, and particularly this decade, which is one, giving agents a wallet that is permissionless, crypto rails, kind of unlocks them, untethered them from like complex sign-up processes with banks or outright impossibilities by using closed APIs. And then the other thing is giving them more power, making them smarter through better models. And that obviously started with the arrival of large language models. And so I think, initially built 2 years with Fetch, and then later started Valory, which is the labs behind Olas. I've seen a lot of iterations on how agents are being built, and the capabilities obviously massively increased now, which is super, super exciting. And one thing that never changed is really those two facts. Like, to build interesting agent, the agent needs to be capable, which comes back down to models and what they can do to enable you to build good agent architectures. And the other thing is the agent needs to be able to do things in the real world. And most interesting things we can be doing are associated with offering services or consuming other people's services, i.e., which means you need some form of you need a wallet to spend and that wallet, as we all know on the show, probably in crypto is just much more easy to get started. What's actually interesting just on that point is now we're seeing the first sort of AI agent wallets, right, from Stripe, Visa, MasterCard, so sort of more closed approaches. It'll be interesting to see how those two things play out in the medium term.
Yep. So when you build and design these models, what do you start with? So you built 3 in Olas, right? Let's talk about those 3.
Right. So an agent is
how
more
do you
than
think
just
about
a
them?
model. Yeah. So just to be clear, the agents I mentioned at the beginning of the show, they are systems. They consist of the actual models, some wallets, some other rules-based code, and what it comes down to is that, like, obviously what we all would like, what would be the sort of holy grail, is you have effectively something that looks like a model, i.e. a set of weights, and you kind of load them into your GPUs and you throw a goal at them, and the system just does anything and everything, right? Now, that's not how today anyone builds agents. All agents today are hybrid architectures where you have rules-based, non-based systems. So, you have the models call into tools, which are a set of rules, which allow it to do very deterministic things.
Can you finish this and then give us an example just so people can...
So for instance, you might ask an agent in Olas to participate in prediction markets on your behalf. So what this really means is you fund that agent with some stable coins and say, okay, please use that to trade in prediction markets on my behalf. Now, the agent needs to do a couple of things. It needs to find those markets, which is basically engaging like a set of APIs, retrieving that information. It then needs to make a prediction on these markets. That's the tricky part, right? And that's where historically it was very hard to do this, because you would have to define like a custom model, like maybe you have like a custom time series model or a custom NLP model or a combination thereof. And then you would have to constantly tune these models in a very custom way. But the interesting thing with large language models is you can literally prompt the model. And we've shown with our predict system that these prompt-based prediction, predicting the future based on prompts in a large language model actually works. We have like a whole bunch of what we call tools that use these models that perform better than average, and some of them even at the 60th and 70th percentile.
What does that mean for everyone?
So they would like about 60% of the time get the future right, so to speak. Just better than 50, and this means you can start building interesting products. And so basically what this means is now the agent has access to predicting the future via these models. It has access to finding out what the current markets are. And then it needs some tools to actually act on those markets. Now, we have fully rules-based in our system because there's nothing uncertain there, right? Every time you're placing a position in a prediction market, it's the exact same routine. There's nothing there to be figured out the second time you do it. So we just coded that as a tool, which then the agent has as a tool that it can access. It's deterministic. It just says put X amount of stablecoin into Y position, and then that subroutine will do this. And so as a result, you can already see the agent itself is like a system consisting of all sorts of tools and the model and so on. And then they in collection make up that agent.
Why did you start with those? Like, how did you decide what model to build? In which order, basically? Why did you focus on the ones you have built?
We wanted to have use cases that get better with scale. So where more users using the agent would allow us to build a better agent. The prediction market example very much applies, because in order to even understand which models and which workflows on top of those models actually generate good predictions about the future, you need just a lot of predictions about the future, because
Yep.
this is a numbers game. And so that use case very much applies there. The DeFi use case, which I mentioned before, also has this characteristic. So in order to build a good agent that autonomously invests your crypto funds into various yield opportunities, be it like
Yep.
lending markets, or actually just buying a coin, like holding a long position in a coin, let's say, or more complex derivatives, you need to again have a view on like any given implementation. You need to have a view on how that performs across a lot of users and
Yep.
across a lot of markets. So again, this product gets better the more agents we have.
Yep.
And so that's generally the outlook we have in deciding what use cases we as the labs focus on. It's use cases which obviously also end users want. I mean, that's the other and most important form factor here. But if, for instance, you have a use case that just a niche set of users want, but it's very hard to build,
Yep.
then it might just not be worth your time.
Yep. How long does it take to build one of the models? Of course, I know it varies, but like just to give an estimate for one of the ones, let's say the DeFi one, for example, from ideation to shipping it.
It really varies. So usually we spend around 2 months from ideation to a first MVP.
Yep.
And that's with this hybrid approaches we're currently deploying, where it's a mixture of rules-based and knowledge-based systems. So some part of it is model-based, some of it is rules-based, and we are obviously interested in pushing this time down. So one way you can make progress there is with another type of agent, which is currently really on vogue, which is coding agents. Coding agents had their day now, and like everyone's has an eye on them, and everyone's using them in some way or another. And they're getting there. I mean, some of them are pretty useful for the sort of junior engineering kind of tasks.
Yep.
They can scaffold your tests, they can scaffold or even write your tests, they can your unit tests, they can do a number of other things reliably or somewhat reliably. And if you have like a human in the loop, another engineer in the loop, you can really get some productivity gains.
Yep.
It's not yet that you can just say, okay, here is a prompt and out comes the agent. But obviously that's something we're looking into. How can we get the time down to build agents faster? And then generally, as I say, I think everyone who's building agents is aware that there's so many ways of building like domain specific agents, and that's really what everyone's doing right now. But how can you get from these domain specific agents to general purpose agents? And that's still unsolved. What I would also say is that a lot of these agent use cases on the developer side highlight one of the challenges with agents more generally, which is that, at some point you come into this territory where the agent is actually more capable than the human prompting it. You have the same thing with models. So you can, you have people very good at prompting ChatGPT or some other model, and they will be able to get very good answers out of it. And then there's other people who are very bad at prompting, and they'll get worse answers out of it. And it's the same if you think about this idea in everyone's mind that we can just sort of prompt our apps. Now, if you have in mind something as loose as build me a good DeFi app, like what does that even mean? What does good mean? What does DeFi mean? Like there's a lot of ambiguity here. So maybe one day we have a general purpose agent who will just sort of pop one at you, like right here it is. But that means there's a gazillion decisions between this and the end product, which the system was made for you. And so the question is, are you as a user aligned with those decisions, right? It's similar like how you pick a product, like let's say the streaming product here, right? There's a different ways of building a streaming product, and so the question is, how did you choose that, and so on? Well, you looked at the features and so on. So I think this idea that we sort of overnight, even with very powerful technology, go from a moment where everyone's frustrated that they don't have the app they like to everyone has the app they like, I don't think that will ever happen, because you have this problem of determinism. You can't just the system can't just automatically know everything about
everything you want.
Yeah, and it will have to make assumptions, and then when you use the product, you're like, actually, that's not what I wanted. So that there's an interesting tension here.
What's your so I want to talk about multi-agent systems. So what is a multi-agent system?
Yeah, I mean, the definition would be that you have sort of multiple agents that are in some way connected. So the interesting thing, what we saw, I mean, what is sort of inherent to humanity's progress is that we are social by nature, and that is the underpinning of all of our progress. Like, if we weren't social, nothing would have ever happened, right? We would still exist in like a very sorry state. And all this technology around us, everything which facilitates our interaction and so on, is built on the fact that we can coordinate around certain goals and objectives, and sort of define a mission, and then as a team execute that, etc. And that's why, I mean, that's sort of the same idea is with software agent. It's like, if you really want to push the needle, you will want to have specialized software agent interacting with each other. Because previously I mentioned this sort of tension between specialized and generalized agent. Now, there's this tension on the software side, right? Like, you can say, okay, can I even build a generalized agent? And today we can mostly just build specialized agents. But even once you can,
what is a specialized versus a general? Just so everyone knows.
I mean, the definition I would give, like the layman, is a general one. I can define any goal, and it will be within its means able to execute it, within its resource means. Whereas a specialized agent, like the agents Olas offers, your DeFi agent won't suddenly turn into an influencer. We have another agent for that, but you can never get your DeFi agent to be an influencer, and vice versa.
So it's the same as thinking of a generalist, jack of all trades employee who does a bit of everything versus someone who can come in and do like brain surgery, specialized, very specific.
And that's you getting me to the point I want to make, which is, if you look at humans, they're initially somewhat generalized, right? And we have like certain tendencies to be better at certain things than other humans, but in general, we have a shared set of skills, and then we specialize, and we specialize actually for economic and societal reasons. We found out that is very efficient to run a society and to make progress, is if we specialize. It does not make sense for me to now have this podcast and then start roaming around my garden to make sure I have food on the table, right? Like, I will just focus on doing one thing and do that very well, ideally. And the same pressure applies to software agents, because they're in the same, economic world of, at the end of the day, you have a comparative advantage. And if you lean into that advantage, you can do much better on that angle and sell much more of your service or good here, whilst other people focus on doing this other thing. And that is why I think multi-agent systems, and in fact agent economies, will dominate ultimately, because like humans found out, software agents will find out that specialized software agents, even if they come from this primordial generalized version, will ultimately be the ones that are economically most relevant. And so in this, today we already have multi-agent systems. So Olas agents, if you download Pearl, which you can do on olas.network, and use that app, any of the free agent use cases I aforementioned, these agents that you have locally will actually talk to other agents in the Olas network to get stuff done, simply put. And that therefore is a multi-agent systems where agents kind of communicate with each other, sometimes simply for information, sometimes for services, and so on.
What's your if we take more of a almost like a macro view when it comes to like AI and everything, because it's such an expansive space now. Everything is being affected, right?
Hmm.
To give you an example, so in my Web2 companies, I mean, we've replaced dozens of roles over the last 2 years. Um, the ones who stay are the specialists who really who know, of course, you mentioned knowing how to prompt. Those are the ones who really understand and can think for the machine and understand best how to get the result. But when it comes to junior copywriters, email formatters. So when it comes to Web2, those, I have several businesses in Web2. There's dozens of roles that will never, ever, ever come back. What's your view if you take a step back, because you've been in AI for longer than many watching this? Um, where's this going? Like, what is your take? Because you're in it, you're building it. Where's this going from? We see the Googles, we see OpenAI. What's the world that you see in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard to make long-term predictions here because
Yep.
this technology is so even like so new and its implications so vast. I mean, we now see, like, for instance, this open source model being quite competitive, which has
Yep.
very big implications about any economic predictions, right? Because if only closed AI can win, then will look very different than if open source AI can be on par and so on. But I think there's
Open source AI, just define maybe the
yeah. So like
difference.
closed AI is it's OpenAI, Anthropic, this kind of model where you have a labs, they build a very cool model, we all like it. We access the API to access this model. We rent it.
Yep.
Open source AI is this idea that I can like outright own the model. Like someone, for whatever economic reasons, creates a model that I can then fully download and host on the infrastructure of my choosing.
Yep.
And it has big implications because if you think about, for instance, any business, as you were describing yourself, you increasingly rely on AI, be it as on the
Yep.
augmentation side or full autonomy. And that means every time we're saying we rely on AI, we're calling some of those models, like mostly,
Yep.
um, large language models. And so what we then are doing is we're like, if you think of it like your sort of revenue, right? Some fraction of this is starting to grow. That is basically costs to OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever model you're calling,
Yep.
and then you kind of layer something on top, which is your refined service, and then that's hopefully allows you to make a profit overall and have a
Yep.
business. If you think about open source, if you can replace that cost with like an open source model, that means you pay less rent to the centralized entity. And
Yep.
that can actually have very big implication for the overall market structure, because it can mean that the overall market structure becomes much more competitive, right? And generally,
Yep.
one thing we know from communism and capitalism, specifically capitalism, is that competitive markets are what is sort of the promising underpinning of capitalism. Once all the competitive markets erode and everything becomes like a monopoly or oligopoly, it sort of really makes it hard for startups to grow. It makes it hard for innovation to spread, for
Yep.
small businesses to start up, and so on. And so ideally, I think what most people probably want, because most people aren't owning an oligopoly or monopoly, is that we have very competitive markets around us. And so
Yep.
I think most people would therefore want things to happen that favor those. And largely speaking, I think like sort of open source models and progress in AI that lends to fast diffusion into lots of businesses and easy adoption by these businesses is
Mm-hmm.
beneficial to a scenario where basically everything becomes very centralized, right? I think we see interesting. So we have a podcast of our own where we dive into this just recently, called Asians Unleashed podcast, and
Nice. We'll
Vince
plug.
has,
We'll add the links here
yeah,
around the recording and everything. Yep.
that the McKinsey recently did an interesting study in this. They have done a whole reports. It's worth looking at that. But yeah, I find myself unable to predict this, but more like I think one thing is prediction, but like, you know, there's also agency, right? That's the whole point. And like the way we build Olas and Valory is really with this mission to further the type of AI that allows you full ownership over renting the AI. I mean, it's very important, like, that we start owning things more again. Like in the, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we would own everything. Like, you know, all the physical devices, you would buy them and then they'd be in your house. Now, increasingly with technology, we have this weird like hybrids where even the TV, we're sort of renting it because the TV will stop working once certain subscriptions are turned off, right? And the same thing will potentially happen with AI. And there's real risks in that model, you know, for the average consumer. So I think like creating more businesses around offering ownership of your AI, whatever that AI is, as an AI agent, is it like a ChatGPT, is it like some other product you're offering, I think is very compelling counterforce.
Have you seen that Black Mirror episode in the most recent season about the subscription model?
I haven't yet, no, but
oh, you should. I won't spoil it for you, but everything you just talked about, the ownership versus renting, watch it. You'll know exactly. Just remember, subscription, Black Mirror. You'll see exactly. It's I believe the first or second episode in the new season.
Will do.
It's actually very AI heavy, so it's actually very interesting. I think you'll enjoy it.
All right.
Some of the episodes. What's your view on, you know, all these talking about monopolies? All these giants now are competing, right? There's a talent race. I don't know if you've seen the salaries being offered just to basically acquire talent. So, you know, it's funny because it reminds me of the finance space in like the mid 2000s, early 2010s, where big hedge funds would literally just pay people not to work for the competitor, just to keep them at home. And we're seeing the arms race now. What's your, you know, Google's been disappointing over the last few years when it comes to consumer AI, and then you see OpenAI coming in and ChatGPT revolutionizing the space. Google coming now back in full force. What's your take? Right, there's several players in the space. What's your take on what's happening?
I mean, it's a lot about distribution and a lot about compute, right? Like with AI, like if you want to scale a product, you're gonna very quickly be bottlenecked by the compute side, and then that is bottlenecked by energy. So when we're really talking about like, you know, going from hundreds of millions to several more billions of users of a certain product, and then on the distribution side, obviously, Google has that, and I mean, Google has always had this very, like, it's a known fact that they have all this innovation in-house and very little of it makes it to the consumer. And often it makes it actually in some form to the consumer, but then they have internal fights which kind of nullify that. And so I think it's refreshing to see that there's like real like progress with the product suite now. But yeah, coming back, I mean, you know, looking at how we are running our business, like certainly over the last few years, I feel like we are leaning more and more into like Google Suite and a number of other products, right? And that is very inefficient. Like even with our mission to, you know, focus on user-owned AI, like it would be very inefficient for me to try to solve 10 problems at the same time. So we'll just use the best tools to work together. But it is frustrating that things are so highly centralized around a number of players. And I think, you know, it's maybe a bit of a cheeky hope, but I think so far there's a lot of assumptions baked into that you have to really scale that aggressively with that much cash to win this particular race. And it could play out different. Like there is, I think, you know, a lot of assumptions around like some sort of form of AGI, which then everyone will sort of default use from that one provider. Sort of underpin a lot of those fundraisers, and then they are also referential, right? If OpenAI raises a big round, and then that affects everyone else, and their capability to raise bigger rounds, which then affects salaries and so on. So not too much actually in the real world has to happen for that to really revert and the reality to be quite different. Now, I don't know, I don't know more than you about that future, but I do think there's, again, coming back to the agency, it's very important to explore alternative paths. Like, I'm not a good marketer, and increasingly I like spending a lot of time thinking about like messaging, marketing, emotions, this kind of thing. You think about the old car ads, they're all about this like ideal of freedom, and you're somewhere with your car, and like you're totally like all you needed to do is fill up the tank, and now you're free. That actually no longer exists, because today you can have a full tank and then some electronic bullshit goes wrong in your car. There's no way you're gonna fix it on the road, right? Back in the day, you open up the front, you screw up around a little, and it'll keep driving. No longer happening. So how do we get back to this world where we have autonomy for our software and autonomy for ourselves, and where everyone can have like cool humanoid robots at home, cool AI agents in the web, and in the digital realm, and really be independent and therefore autonomous as an individual. And I think that comes so much back to this notion of freedom that, like, historically the US has been very kind of a kind of beacon of, and I think there's much to be said about like some revolution where we'll go back to that, but I don't know when exactly that will happen and which force, but I think it will happen.
Yep. Are you like, is any of this AI progress making you worried or concerned? There's a lot of that talk to, of course, all the potential for positivity. Are you concerned about certain aspects of the AI, of how it's growing, because it is growing exponentially and progressing?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to get concerned about a whole bunch of things, right? At any given point in time about any given topic. I'm still very optimistic that this technology will have a very, very positive effect. And again, like as it seems, I think if you're concerned, if you're listening to this, like, you have agency. I mean, it's about exploring like how are you going to set a counterweight to like food action you take to get us on the right path. And I think even like, if you think about the incentives here, and coming back to crypto, like, there's most of the researchers who are creating these models and the product people behind these models and these powerful technologies, they're like you and I. I mean, they don't want, I think, to live in a society that's enormously stratified with like, a few winners and the rest has no job and has to live off some sort of breadcrumbs. I think by and large we are very much aligned on that, and it's about like creating incentive systems that push us into that. And obviously the VC model with the like very intense centralization of ownership and upside, maybe it's just particularly bad for that period, right? And so like, I think one PMF which crypto always had was around like capital formation, but it's also where its biggest and most egregious like failures lie, right? And so the question is, how can you use like the good parts of crypto to spread out more of the gains of impeding, AI progresses? And I think that's another angle of how we're looking at this. Like, as we're building towards this, how can we build like a token economy where even if you're just a token holder, you're not even like just a user of the system, you're still like a positive participant in the system.
We have about 5-10 minutes left. I want to switch to your like the vision for you, like as a builder in the space, both in AI but also of course in crypto, and then the final question, which is always a question I ask to guests about, what is your take on this crypto cycle? But let's start with what are you wanting to build? Like, what is your grand vision basically for when it comes to AI? And then if you want to talk about crypto too, go ahead.
I would like a general purpose AI agent that I can give somewhat arbitrary goals, and it will be given it within the means of its resources, execute against them at any given time. I would want that system to be super, super transparent, and sort of I want to have ownership of it. So that I'm willing to give it like a lot of my personal data and a lot of my personal preferences. What was the second part of the question?
The second question is, when it comes to crypto, like really building in crypto and being involved, because it's also a strategic choice, right? You could have been building the agents outside of crypto. What also made you want to go into crypto? You mentioned briefly the sharing, basically the fruits of and making people benefit not just from using the agents, but also from being in the community without necessarily using it.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is with crypto, I think in many ways it's like a very superior technology, and then like the way it comes about to the user is fundamentally still broken. You make it way too hard for users to use it. And there's all this mental overhead of using it, because the user currently is still required to learn a lot of things which should be abstracted. I don't think having transparency and agency and owning your keys does therefore mean you have to be understanding every single layer of the technology and every single concept. I think there's a way to achieve that where you can, through reputation mechanisms and verifiable technologies, enable users to have that trust that there is that transparency, which they borrow from other experts, let's say. So I think fundamentally it's possible. It's just we're not there yet. And then in terms of every time I'm thinking about like the most exciting agents, those are agents that don't have to go to some centralized API and say, can I please have an API key? And then go through like a sign up step. And then eventually they fail at some point because the human wasn't in the loop, or because the system rejected them, or they had it and then they were offboarded. For me, this is a system where permissionlessly you just turn on and you are. I mean, also if you think about AGI as a product, or like sort of very general purpose agents, initially when you think of them, it might be more like a product. You give them like kind of a goal, they do it for you, then they're off. But effectively, it's impossible to say at which point that blurs into some form of sentience and some form of being, like synthetic being, that boundary gets blurred at some point. And so then there's a question, can you turn it off, and how much agency should it have, and how much freedom should it have? And this becomes also very relevant, right? If you can just turn something on and it can exist, like that's actually like enabled by crypto. And then like on the incentive side, I'm looking at what we are doing. Like we're using incentives to coordinate like a network of builders and operators and other kinds of contributors on the marketing and so on side to bootstrap an ecosystem of user-owned agents. There's other projects I admire, which are, for instance, looking at the problem of decentralized training of a model. Intellect come to mind, Jensen come to mind. There's others that, or Sentient also, there's others that look at the data aspect of this. And in all those cases, when I'm looking at their ideas and the way they're going about executing them, like tokens and the ability to coordinate like multiple stakeholders via the token to contribute to this larger objective is really key to it. And it enables a kind of ownership and participation that other networks don't. And two, I think also point out, right, even OpenAI has WorldCoin. Well, it's against other play. And this whole proof of humanhood versus like personhood, or proof of human versus like what is a machine, what is a human, that is going to become increasingly relevant. And so like approaches like this, I'm not the biggest fan of having my iris scanned, but there's other approaches to this as well. I think they're very relevant. And they again bring an ability to bootstrap crypto networks in a completely new way, right? Like when we have this problem of civil resistance that is partially solved there, or fully solved.
Speaking of WorldCoin, probably you saw this. For those who didn't see, they just closed a new round of funding. Today was announced $130 million to expand to the US, I believe.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last part of his sentence. To what? To the US?
To expand operations in the US.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a big deal. A big deal.
Yeah. I think that product will go places even. Yeah, I mean, I was very skeptical in the beginning, and increasingly I'm like, yeah, obviously we do need there's a lot of utility in having like the ability to differentiate humans from machines, which is obvious, but actually executing that as a product, which they seem to be doing quite well.
Yep. All right, last question. This is the question that everyone wants to know for each guest is what are your thoughts on this crypto cycle when it comes purely to price action? What's your estimate when it comes to Bitcoin doing price action wise in the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm so bad at that. I'm the worst trader. I mean, there's this kind of macro way of looking at it, right? And like generally, I would expect it to do better, but I don't know whether that is relative to current levels. When it comes to not just Bitcoin, but altcoins as well, and just the wider market, I do think like crypto has this interesting ambivalence where anyone can launch an infinite number of coins, and therefore we have like this kind of crazy number of coins that can be and will be in existence, and at the same time we only need a handful of them. Even with machines, I mean, this is not like everyone needs hundreds and hundreds of coins. There's no efficiency there, and so I think we're starting to grapple with this, and it's a very immature space in the sense that hype gets front run and then like despair gets front run, right? Like, and the same people will kind of switch from the one to the other in very, very short amount of time. I think what I'm now seeing sometimes a lot is like, crypto projects which are literally just started out are expected to have like significant revenue, like some very mature businesses. Whereas a few months before, like the same people were calling to invest in some meme coin that didn't even have a team, right? I feel like that just harms the space, and I sometimes wish that just like those traders that are a bit louder were to get better at like helping with that early capital formations around a really good product, because that could really accelerate the space as a whole.
I completely agree. I having built a lot in Web 1 before Web 2, I mean, businesses take time. People think that you can TG and you're already profitable, and and the community is getting like they're staking rewards. It's like this. If you building businesses takes time. Yeah, I completely agree. And I do agree with it is an immature space, and it's a young space, and it will mature into better products, and efficiency will increase over time too. So yeah, any closing words, anything you'd like to say to the audience before we wrap it up?
Yeah, we have a number of products you can try. Go to olas.network, give them a spin. We have a Discord and Telegram group very active at the bottom of our page, where you can then share any feedback you might have, or on X at Autonolas, or just at me, David_Enum. And then the other thing is, if you are looking for a new career move, we are hiring heavily at Valory. So you can go to valory.xyz, and our careers page has a number of roles open. So
very good. We'll link everything here when we drop the recording and the articles after the episode. David, thank you for joining us on the CoinRock Show. Founder of Olas, very deep in AI. Love these conversations because we always want to bring guests who are actually building things, doing things, and David is one of them. So thank you for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will link everything here so people can easily find you, and we will catch you guys next time. Talk soon.
Thank you, Matt.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you got value from this episode, you're going to love what's coming next. So subscribe now. We drop new episodes and videos several times a week featuring power players, market movers, and insiders from the financial world. And if you want access to deals and insights we only share privately, hit the links in the description and we'll see you on the next show.